A few years ago, Big Mike from the Sweep the Rack podcast wrote an article that was published on 11thframe.com by Jeff Riggles as a guest column. I don't watch a lot of other bowling content, admittedly. I spent enough time making it. So while I knew STR, I know who Mike and Rob are, I wasn't super familiar with them or their show. Now, at the time, Mike's column read to me like just one of those typical loudmouth bowlers getting up on their soapbox, condescending to all the league and house shot bowlers. He was bemoaning house shots and all the honor scores and big averages and made repeated use of the word fraudulent. Because I also like to get up on my own soapbox and talk down to people who talk down to people, I wrote my own somewhat pandering vanilla article that Jeff also posted. Now, a lot of people thought that I was talking out of both sides of my mouth because I was trying to be too diplomatic. And Mike already had his own impression of me going into it because I'm a ball reviewer, and he thought I'd taken a shot at him in the article. And honestly, I kind of did in an indirect way. It was more a shot at people who thought like what he was sounding like, not at him specifically because I didn't know him. I just thought I knew the type. Now, obviously, it'd be pretty helpful if you'd read the articles to get the context. I'm not going to add 30 minutes to the video to read them through, but if you watch STR, you know Mike and Rob don't like how soft the conditions are today. While I wrote something defending softer conditions for the more recreational or basic league bowler, because with life being so busy today, a lot of people don't have the time to get out and practice and don't want to spend what's supposed to be a fun, relaxing night at league beating their heads against a wall in a sport pattern. All the social media chatter about the articles and the response to mine kind of pissed me off, so I wrote another article that was a lot more blunt and kind of a rant in the same direction. I felt like if people wanted to have fun, then let them. I know people who have been run off by serious bowlers or who have seen how more serious bowlers treat people who are just starting. I know, I don't like them either. I also know good serious bowlers who have been run off by other serious bowlers because they just got sick of dealing with them. People have to have fun first, and if they're not having fun, they're never going to chase it any further. However, I've come to understand Mike and Rob over the last few years, and they may or may not be your cup of tea, but they're not blowhards. They care about the game of bowling, and STR is just like a show that you might find on ESPN. A couple of guys talking about the game and putting their opinions out there. Just like the sports personalities like Pat McAfee or Stephen A. Smith, Nick Wright, or whoever, you may not agree with them, but they're passionate about the game and what they're talking about. As bowling continues to kind of languish, as we're talking about string pins and Bolero taking over and centers closing down, creators burning out, and as I've been facing my own interest in bowling fading, I keep thinking. And because I'm not the kind of person to just disagree with somebody and write them off and move on, I've kept paying attention. I catch some of STR occasionally. I mostly watch their shorts and follow their page on Facebook, and I find that I agree with them on a lot of things. I get them more now too, so to speak, and that keeps taking me back to what he was talking about in the article, and I have to admit that I'm coming around. I have a friend from overseas who was trying to improve and was getting really discouraged because he saw so many big scores on social media from our side of the pond, so he felt like he wasn't getting any better. So I had him send me some video to take a look, and I was kind of confused because he threw it really well, but he was only averaging 170 or 175 or something. After a lot of back and forth, come to find out, he's never bowled on a house or league pattern. Most of the time he's on something 4-1 or tougher. So yeah, when you're virtually bowling on sport conditions full time, 175 ain't bad. What really started to drive this home too is that as a lefty, I don't put up the same kind of scores that I used to righty. Now I'm still a scratch bowler. I'm still averaging 220, but I do that by consistently shooting solid but typically unremarkable scores. I think my high set for the year last year was 750. I didn't shoot a 300, but I had a really good second half of the year. I think I was up over 225, and I've generally felt pretty good about how I've been throwing it for most of 2025. However, I haven't felt like posting a thing on Facebook. 730 isn't really a newsworthy score, and it's one of those things that gets kind of laughed at when somebody shoots 716 and makes the paragraph long acceptance speech and tagging their reps and hashtagging their brands and shouting out the latest ball that became a staple in their bag after throwing it for a game and a half. Even when you do shoot 300, nobody really cares anymore, and it feels like you have to shoot 850 for anybody to even blink. The way that I eventually came up with to describe the situation in general, or which is the impact that easier conditions have had on the game, or when you're thinking about, okay, well, what's wrong with house shots? Why can't people just have fun? Blah blah, so on and so forth. It's when people go to a league or to a tournament, it's on a house shot. They're disappointed if they shoot their average, even if their average is solid. Like if I go to league, my average is 220 and I shoot 660, it feels like a waste of a night. Even if I shoot 700, it's like, oh, cool, 700, but it's still not really a blip on the radar. Good night, threw it good, happy with it. It just don't really care. So in general, people typically end up mostly disappointed with how league goes. There's always somebody complaining about monster scores and handicap or whatever else. People will always go to leagues and tournaments envisioning big scores, and they push for big scores, and their whole opinion on their game or how well they did is tied to their score. It doesn't really matter if they threw it good or not. Score is king on a house shot. Meanwhile, bowling was booming back when a 200 average meant you were amazing. Now, granted, people are busier today. There's a lot more things competing for people's time and money. So that's a huge factor. But even when people were just out for a night with friends to drink and they were bowling on rough conditions with the one urethane or plastic ball that they own that probably didn't even fit right, doing scores by hand, bug sprayer and a mop, putting down oil that definitely wasn't going to be consistent week to week or pair to pair. And because the scoring pace as a whole was significantly lower back then than it is now, nobody knew any different. It was a whole lot harder to have real success at bowling back then. You couldn't just go buy more balls or go bowl at a center with a wide open shot to put your scores up. If you shot your average, you were doing okay. And when your average went up, it meant you were getting better because there just wasn't any other way for that to happen. 180 was a solid game back then, nothing to sniff at, and because people didn't routinely put big sets up, bowling was just typically seen as a tougher sport in general, so nobody went home after shooting 550 and felt like quitting. Now, when I bowl on sport patterns now, it's a whole different feeling. Shooting 200 feels great, throwing a clean game feels great, and putting up a score on a sport pattern that would depress me on a house shot is great. As scores come easier on bowling, good or bad luck factors in more significantly too. With bowling scoring system, the difference between 300 and 258 could be driving by a couple of 9 pins. Same way it works on tougher conditions, obviously, but because the scores are going to be lower anyway, something like that doesn't hurt nearly as much. You're going to be harmed much more by bad shots than by bad breaks. I really do believe that things need to get tougher again, and I know that's a bell that you just can't unring right this very second, but there's a lot of good happening in that direction, at least for youth bowlers. A lot of them grow up bowling on difficult conditions now. Jillian Martin became a phenom on the women's side and won professional titles before she shot her first 300 game because she just never bowled on softer conditions. The kids now are used to bowling on super tough conditions at leagues and tournaments all the way up and through college. And while a lot of them do bowl house shot leagues, it's just something to do. It's nothing challenging. It's nothing particularly fun or rewarding, even though it's always fun to shoot a big score, no matter how easy the conditions are. I'm not going to lie and tell you I've ever had a bad time shooting 300 or 800. But I haven't even filled out paperwork for my last several 300s. One of them, the center secretary made me do it, but there's no reason. People were there, and I got a cut of the prize fund for it. It doesn't need to go up on a list on bowl.com so I can brag about numbers on a house shot. And before people whine about USBC not giving out awards anymore, that if I got a ring for every single one of them, I'd still fill them out, but I don't, so I don't. But before you want to complain about that, the governing body of our sport should never have been involved in handing out prizes or rings or trophies in the first place. USBC membership is another video, so we'll move on here. Now, don't think that I'm belittling anyone else's pride or accomplishments either. I think it's great that people still have fun scoring on house shots. I've defended house shots and handicap going back years and years, and if you don't believe me, I have videos up on my channel from almost a decade ago talking about both of them. People need to be able to have fun, and they need training wheels on sometimes when they're learning. It's just the problem with house shots is that they aren't really training wheels. They're actually anti-training and anti-learning, because when you get on tougher conditions, literally everything is reversed. On house shots, you're trained to get the ball to the outside and bounce it off the friction. On sport conditions, there's oil outside, so the ball just slides. On house shots, if you miss inside, no big deal because there's a frickin' puddle in the middle. On sport patterns, you miss inside and it's taking off. House shots don't help you learn how to bowl. They actively create bad habits and work against you. We have nationals coming up in a few weeks, and instead of already being conditioned for more difficult patterns, I have to go waste my next several Sunday mornings in the bowling alley trying to work out the house shot muscle memory and get back in tough pattern shape. I think scoring pace is probably the biggest factor in bowling's decline and in people leaving the sport for several different reasons. First and foremost, if something becomes too easy or feels like too much luck is involved, people lose interest pretty quickly. Next, it became infinitely more expensive when resin balls and all these different lane conditions were introduced. Instead of just having a couple different balls and the skill of the bowler was the dominant factor, in the outcome. Now you have all these balls that do all kinds of different things, and to keep up with the scoring pace, you have to buy tons of them. Well, now we have these different kinds of lane conditions too. That means you have to have several different sets or groups of several different balls to combat all these different lane conditions. We have balls that flare that pick up all kinds of oil off the lane and transition them significantly faster than they used to. Then because of transition, we have balls for that too. Then as bowling balls hook more, oil volumes increase. And because oil volumes increase, bowling balls hook more. More surface, higher rev rates, and that means that oil patterns have to get weird to fight that. This also has led to the side-to-side disparity. Lefty versus righty didn't used to be that big of a problem because you were using very weak balls that didn't flare on drier lane conditions that didn't transition much. So while there were still some minor differences, it's not nearly what we have now. If you put out a 30 mil pattern and have 9 righties with 500 rev rates using big flaring balls at 1,000 grit, but only have one lefty trying to do the same thing, even though both sides start with the same pattern, it doesn't even take a game to be playing on completely different conditions. It's not enough to just be good at bowling anymore. You literally have to have the bankroll for the equipment necessary to compete. This has also led to the infamous matching up issue. A lot of guys on tour feel like now if you don't have a rev rate, you can't compete. And even beyond that, you got to match up too. If you happen to find the magic ball matchup faster than somebody else, you don't necessarily have to throw it better because you have the look. Just like the saying, you can't outbowl bad ball reaction. Sometimes you can't outbowl good ball reaction either. Matching up didn't used to be a thing either. You either bowled better than somebody else or you didn't. And even in the early days of resin, there weren't a whole lot of balls to go through, and they weren't all so different. Lane surfaces were newer. You were still bowling on wood most of the time. All the problems now that frustrate and piss people off, or not all of them, I don't want to say all of them, most of the problems now that frustrate and piss people off didn't exist 30 plus years ago. Now people can't afford to compete because they either can't afford the equipment, they can't afford the practice, they can't afford the time, or all of the above. What used to be a super accessible blue-collar sport has been so overly and needlessly complicated that most people are just stuck being disappointed and not having any fun week after week because all they see is themselves being artificially limited by their circumstances. However, people can have fun playing something as simple as cornhole. It's become popular because it's just a board, some bags, and your own skill. It's not expensive. It's not complicated. You can set yourself up for cornhole completely for less than the cost of a single bowling ball, and practicing is as simple and cheap as setting the boards up somewhere. Mike and Rob were talking about darts overseas the other day too. It's insane to see huge crowds getting super excited over something like darts. People now say that it's boring watching bowling, just watching urethane balls go down the lane all the time if we have a urethane fest on a show. But when that's all it was 40 or 50 years ago, it was insanely popular. Pickleball, disc golf, etc. It seems like people are starting to migrate back to the simpler, less time and cost prohibitive games and activities. This isn't to say that tournament bowling is unpopular, though. It's, again, seen a great resurgence with the youth. Stuff like the Masters is selling out in 10 minutes. The Open Championships is booming again. Tournaments like Greater Ozarks and Springfield, Missouri last for 4 solid months. But league bowling continues to decline. A lot of people think string pins are another nail in the coffin. I disagree there, and that's yet another video and an interesting conversation. But Bolero has shown both with their centers and the handling of the PBA that they aren't interested in competitive bowling, or they're only interested if it's profitable, and the second it's not, you're free to leave. I could keep rambling for hours and hours on this, but it's something to think about and to create discussion. I'd love to sit down and cut it up now with Mike and Rob, because I think it'd be a great time and a great conversation. And I must be getting old, because I think for bowling to get popular again, we need to go back to tough conditions. Balls like, we need to go back to tough conditions. Just having balls like the pitch black and or black hammer, and start putting arsenal limits on things. Nobody needs to drag 6 balls into league. It causes problems. It causes clutter, and there's never enough room for all this crap. Or cap oil volume so that we don't have 1,000 grit 8-inch flaring balls destroying the pattern before you even get out of practice, so on and so forth. People will have more fun when they feel like they're earning success instead of buying it, when they feel like the playing field is more fair. And I know I definitely feel it's much more rewarding when I'm bowling on tougher conditions. So thanks for watching, and may the strikes be with you.